Hey guys, welcome to another episode of On Air. I am joined today by James Shakespeare. James is the founder of Evosite, and he's joining us today to have a conversation about the growth stages that you will experience in growing a small business, an SME, that with some ambition and some drive, some of the things that you're going to have to overcome, some of the challenges along that journey. And we're going to learn from James's journey with Evosite today. First and foremost, James, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm very well, Owen. Thank you for having me on your show. I'm very excited.
Pleasure. Yeah, no, it's good to have you. Our journeys reflect each other somewhat, so I'm looking forward to sharing some war stories with you today from the journeys we've both been on. Before we get into topic, though, we always like to give our guests 2 minutes to tell our audience that don't already know you, who's James and who are Evosites.
Cool. So James Shakespeare, or Jim to the majority of the world. And almost 15 years ago, I set up Evosite. I've always been in the creative and the digital space pretty much since it began. I was pretty fortunate to start up a couple of interesting businesses very young. Did most things wrong, which was actually really useful looking at it now. So yeah, it's about 2007, 2008, right when we were in a pretty difficult situation, as I think we're about to go into now economically, that I took the decision to start an agency, a very tech-focused agency that primarily deals with e-commerce solutions. That's across SMEs. We've got some pretty large clients as well that we do a lot of bespoke work. So I was always just very fascinated with customer journey, really interested in terms of how, especially in the early days of the internet, and especially when mobile apps started to develop, how people really interacted with these products. And most importantly, how our clients generated significant return, not just on an improved user interface and how their products were used on various devices, but the technology that runs that and powers that. And that's so much deeper than just the actual front end of what you see on an e-commerce site or a lead generation site. It's really getting to the heart of how that business operates. So that's kind of what we do. Got a team of 30 here in Taunton, growing out quite quickly at the moment across lots of different kind of spaces. So yeah, excited to see what the future brings. So that's a little bit about myself and the business.
Lovely, fantastic. Thanks for that. Well, let's get into topic. I'm actually most interested first in talking about the businesses before Evosite and your comment around got most things wrong. When you look back at that part of your journey, what are some of the mistakes that stand out for you?
Well, a lot of it, I think, is I don't want to just kind of label it on youth, but the first business I set up, I was still at university, so I just turned 20, and so there was a lot of naive thinking behind really what it meant to build a business. But to be fair, everyone was on quite even ground. The internet had only just begun, so yeah, for me, it was just really, I was fascinated about joining up those business problems with what this new world was going to offer. And probably a little bit nosy as a kid. And I just heard lots of conversations going on. I was very, very lucky to grow up in an incredibly entrepreneurial family on both sides. So there was very few people in my family or, friends of the family that weren't running businesses. My father and my grandfather were very, very sales focused. So I just grew up constantly hearing these problems that had to be overcome. So I think it was that in tune part of me that would hear things that were going on, and that would be in a variety of different ways. Anyway, just to kind of briefly touch on that first business, it was a case of hearing a problem that came through the naval industry, the military industry, and solving a problem, not through the internet because it wasn't established, we never had the bandwidth, but through then what was touchscreen CD-ROMs. Saved the company that I was working with a fortune. I don't know what they thought when a 20-year-old rocked up looking like Kurt Cobain in their boardroom really thought, but they took a punt. And from that was a really early learning from myself that everyone can get a shot, and you will be taken seriously. I think if you've got enough passion and enough kind of intellect wrapped around what it is that the area of expertise that you've got. But the failures were really around people. I think being so young, and like I said, I was very lucky to have the kind of parenting that, you were allowed to explore, you were allowed to really go out there and be ambitious, and failure was not necessarily a thing to be concerned about. But it was just trying to find. I was just too inexperienced to really think about the people and the structure that I needed within the business. But we had a good couple-year run. I sold that business, and went on to work within a really kind of fast-paced startup that I was a third employee, and we went to about 300 people within 3 years. So, I learned a lot in that phase. But again, even working through that startup, working with some great entrepreneurs that have done amazing things, that's 20 years ago since then, and built incredible, huge businesses. Um, it's just the pace that you do fail. That's the thing that I really picked up was okay, we're making mistakes, but let's kind of make them with a positive mindset and embrace that to some degree. That's not easy for everyone, but for me, it's always been a bit of a breeze. Don't get me wrong, I don't want to make mistakes. They can be, incredibly expensive, as you know, but it just removed the fear element. You can live on the edge a little bit more. And I think to be an entrepreneur, to build a business, to still be around a couple of decades in, you kind of need to always have a bit of that in you.
Yeah, I think that's fair. We're thinking about Evosite and the sort of stages of growth that you go through. I'm interested to just hear some of the early stage challenges that you had as you grew that business out. Because I guess, I always think about, I always talk about things in chapter. Chapter one for me was everything is me. There's nobody else. You might hire a few people, but you're hiring typically, or I was at a junior level to do the doing, and the thinking, the strategy, the problems, the firefighting, even down to the accounting and the boring stuff. It all went through me, and I'm guessing that most small business owners start in a similar way and find that they're a bottleneck, and there are some big challenges in that phase.
Yeah, massively. I mean, my journey is probably exactly the same as what you and lots of us experience. Yeah, it was. There was everything that was done. I always remember, my kids are grown up now, and they can remember when they were little, actually coming in on a Sunday, and actually helping tidy up the bloody office. It was that hands on. But yeah, it was everything. It was, because I think for me, I always loved that sales and marketing piece. Like I said, I grew up around it. I was a creative. Everything I studied at university was very creative and design led. So I naturally leaned into starting to understand what it meant to build a brand, but also the mechanics of how important sales and marketing is at every stage, and continues. That will always be there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is doing a huge amount. But I think because of what I shared earlier in terms of some early experiences, I was kind of in my late 20s, early 30s when I started Evo. So for me, I'd used those 8 or 9 years to build up a wonderful network of great engineers, great marketing individuals, and that really was, I think, the shot in the arm that the business needed. Because even when there's 3 or 4, 5, 6 of you in there, when you're starting to grow out and you're trying to double a business, which we were doing in the first 5 years, you've got to go at it. I mean, it becomes everything, and there are sacrifices that you make along the way, and there are many people now that are obviously very senior and even shareholders in the business that took a lot of that on their shoulders as we kind of grew out. But I think for me, it was just that shared unity that we're all in this, and I think very, very lucky. The first 5 or 10 that you have in a business, I think really does make or break a huge part of that in terms of the hunger, why we're all doing this, and the genuine passion for what they do. It's like, even if we weren't being paid, we would be doing this. And I still find that now with people that we bring into the business all these years later. But yeah, I think anyone that's out there now that is thinking about starting something, especially in 2023, when there probably will be an awful lot of startups that we'll see emerging in different spaces. It is preparing, and a lot of the rhetoric that you'll see out there now about the hustle, in terms of is it being healthy or not, I don't know. I don't want to really get into that debate, but I know it's needed, and you can't get anything off the ground without that. And you'll always need to sacrifice something, and sometimes it is your time with other things, as we've spoken about before. But yeah, I do miss some of those stages though, because they are, it's not until you're through them that you realize how powerful they are and how much they shape you as an individual.
Yeah, do you know, I think that's a really fantastic point, that actually we love, entrepreneurs typically love building something, and there comes a point where you're building, but you're decorating instead of building, maybe is a better way of putting it, if we're
Yeah.
using a house analogy. And I think you've always got that instinct in you to want to go and create something new, do something from ground up again. Uh, I'm interested, you talked about your first 5 hires, first 10 hires. And maybe the answer is not yet. I don't know, but I'm interested to hear when you outgrew those people, or when they outgrew you potentially, because it's a topic I discuss with quite a few people regularly around. My first hires, on the most part, are no longer with the business, but they were the right people at that time, and we needed them. But there came a point where I can visually look back and see, actually, that was when the business changed away from what they bought into, because it grew to a certain point, or maybe they didn't, they outgrew us in terms of their career trajectory. And you can't hold on to great people forever, as much as you may want to. I'm just keen to hear your story around those early stage hires, whether they stayed, and if not, what stages did that sort of separation start to happen?
I think it was a mixed bag. I think it was
Mm,
probably 4 or 5 years in when that became a reality, because I thought what we
mm,
had was such a great crack. Everyone loved
yeah.
it. We were doing some good work and getting recognized for it. It's like, in my mind, I was like, why would anyone not want to be part of
Yeah, ever.
this?
Yeah.
Ever, yeah. But I think within those 5 years, I realized, yeah, I guess I've always maybe been a little bit older with setting up Evo. Well, I guess old, I don't know, is 30 old. But I think for me, it was just a case of, I really understood the value in individuals and what other people could do that I couldn't. Like, I was really clear with what I knew I brought to the table, and I really wanted just to spend all my time doing that, because I knew that was beneficial to me, personally, but
Yeah.
also was going to give us the quickest route to actually getting somewhere. So it was a mixed bag. I think from a sales and a marketing, certainly a sales perspective, that early piece that we had, which was incredibly hungry, in terms of, my key aim in the first 2 years, I want to build 100 accounts. Now that seemed ridiculous when we first sat down and looked at that, but I knew that would get us to the first step, where we had, good revenue streams, a lot of,
Yeah.
lots of different kind of services, and we would be able to then sit back and think, right, where do we invest that in team, in our sales, in our marketing, in our brand, etc., and,
Mm,
all the development to move to the next stage. So that sales piece isn't something that I knew would probably last forever. I mean, it was very useful at the time, but I had a really interesting conversation with a client of mine. Well, he ran an agency, and we've done work together for years, and he's probably 10 years older than I am. And at that stage, he used to kind of look, that look that you get from someone, which is, I know what you're going to be going through in a few years, because you've been on that road. And he kind of highlighted that. It's like, you'll need a different type of sales and marketing strategy, and the team that
mm,
supports that. And that's the thing that I've seen change a lot over the 3 chapters. I put each chapter almost in kind of like a 4 or 5 year bracket. So for
mm,
us, 15 years next year, which is a massive milestone for us,
mm,
I still see that we're, well, something that I learned a long time ago when someone said to me, and I think it's around quite a bit, takes 20 years to build, a great business, or probably one of the best businesses that you can. We're totally behind that. I think we're pretty good where we are, but to get to that stage is going to take even longer. But I
mm,
think what I've learned through those first initial 5 years is that you've got individuals, that won't be able to develop and grow at the speed of the business.
yeah.
Therefore, that creates a bit of a problem, and that can be for them to, to some degree, that we may not be moving. I think we were going at
Mm,
some pace, but technically, I can see where that happened with a few of the people that moved on. But I'm also equally incredibly proud that the 2 or 3 that were there right at the beginning are now, my MD and technical
mm,
director, and
amazing.
key shareholders in the business. And the reason they are is, I think very early on as an entrepreneur, I wanted to ensure that they had buy-in to the business. And I'll never forget the days and the times that we've done that, in the past. And it makes a huge amount of difference in terms
Yeah.
of someone looking and operating in the business in a different way. I don't think we would have retained that talent if we hadn't gone down that journey. And also, to me, as someone who wants to sleep well at night, I just knew it was the right thing to do. So
Yeah.
it was a mixed bag, really, Owen.
With that early stage, I'm keen to understand. I talk about the settings of a business. So to grow a business, we have to have a level of intent. I want to grow the business, therefore, and you already touched on this, as an entrepreneur, I'm prepared to take certain risks. I'm prepared to do things that make me uncomfortable. I'm prepared to make decisions that others wouldn't make. I'm keen to understand whether you've always been in that setting, whether you've always felt, you know what, we want to grow, we want to go to the next level. That means spending money on this additional marketing strategy. That means investing in salespeople that may not give me a return for 6 to 12 months. That means, saying no to this thing over here, even though desperately want to do it. And you make some tough calls. Have you always been in that setting where there's been an intentional desire and ambition to grow? Or are there times where you've had to settle for a minute and think, okay, I'm all right with where I am, and we might go again in a year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever?
Never intentionally have I been comfortable with settling and holding to any degree. And I think I'm at my best and I'm enjoying my work the most when we are pushing forward, when we have momentum, when we know we're trying to go after something. But that changes in the different stages of building a business, I found. Initially it is about, you're going through, that survival stage initially, aren't you? And it's trying to build the processes. It's trying to understand, what kind of culture you have. And a lot of that is just instinctive. That isn't something that, you've kind of gone, well, this is what it all looks like. It's like that's just built around the heart of a few really, really good people. But I think the only time that I've really been aware of it is when I've had my senior team turn around and go, look, we've been 10 years and we're bringing in so much work. You're going to break what we have. And that was a hard decision a hard conversation to have, really, because, these are people that, my goodness, in terms of loyalty and trust and, just friendship alone, it's like, I don't want to damage what we've just spent 10 years building. And it's very easily done, by sometimes one is normally the founder or the the entrepreneurial side of it, which is go go go, and it's hard to turn that tap off. So what helped with that to some degree was the pandemic, because we were growing, but we were growing in a ways through efficiency. Our bottom line had never been so strong, and that was all credit to the new generation of management and leadership that was within the business. That was hard for me, but at the same time, because of the circumstances that was going on in the world, it was almost the best time for me that you had to move away to some degree. It wasn't, I mean, it was good, to some degree, that you get to spend that time with that you will never get back, probably, with, your kids and family and friends and yourself. But at the same time, I'd find it hard to turn that tap off. I think I always will, which is what that key aspect, that key spirit within an entrepreneurial mindset is, that even if you can't do it within one vehicle you have, I'm always looking at other opportunities that you can do that. So there's always other things, there's always other conversations that you're having where you need to drive, because I don't think it's something that you can turn off easily. And I don't imagine that to be the case even in 20 years time.
No, it's interesting, isn't it? You've talked about sales and marketing strategy a little bit, and I'm keen to just understand or get some of your experiences and commentary around the focus on that for a small business, because of course you do get businesses who grow organically through referral and through other things, but what I've learned a few times in my career is that you can't always rely on that. It's like buses 1 minute and then nothing the next, and from a scalable, predictable model, it makes it very hard to go somewhere. So you've got to take gambles. You've got to go and spend money intentionally on salespeople, sales process, and marketing strategy. And I'm guessing, given your growth and consistency of growth, that's been a consistent focus for you over the years.
Certainly from a sales perspective, I mean, the first hire I ever had in terms of full time was sales, and that first 5 years was built around that. Like I said earlier, I had a bit of the luxury that I could build an element of the brand, I could build an element of what the marketing piece was. And I think, to be fair, it did enough, because we did what we did, and we built a multi-million-pound agency, relatively quickly, considering we were all, pretty wet behind the ears. So I think the sales and marketing has always been a focus for me, and I think it's only during the pandemic, because certainly from our perspective, the amount of clients that we look after, the time that we were at, it was a golden opportunity, as a lot of businesses and a lot of business owners did, which is, let's really refine this so that when we do go back out again, we know we're going out and it never stops. Like, that was my kind of mindset behind it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, the sales and marketing for me, the strategies change over time, obviously, because you're in different phases. And there's delivery behind all of that as well. And market, the market changes to some degree. We're working with technology. And, I used to say to clients, it's like, you're joking, James, isn't it? That, that this week something's different. It's like, no, every day there is something that changes the game for what we do, job, but impacts on your business. So you're constantly moving. You're constantly trying to navigate, your way through. But I would advise anyone at any stage of their business, even when they've reached maturity. When I look at, people get there at different kind of stages. Obviously, I've never been into the high kind of hyper growth. I experienced a part of that before I set up Evo, and it was great to be part of in terms of a culture and experience it. But it kind of just went and then it disappeared. And that was something I was really keen never to be involved in. It was like, if we're going to build anything, let's build something that's going to be here for a while. Let's build something that really means something, that has additional benefits to the financials and the career progression and what we do for clients. It's a more rounded, holistic way of looking at business. And I'm seeing more and more of them, certainly from a younger generation, starting to pop up. There's real intent behind their mission. But yeah, the sales and marketing and the strategic piece, it's hard for me not to. And I think, again, going back to the conversation at the start, it's hard not to keep adding up the dots of, well, all this has to mean something. Therefore, you are driving your sales, you are prioritizing that. And also, even when you have very strong years and, you're doing, pretty well, it's constantly investing in that. It's never settling for that we figured it out, because I know that certainly in our industry, you never do. And it will, tomorrow a new channel can come up, or a new way of attracting, clients, or having conversations, or adding value in any way can suddenly appear. You've got to be over it. You've got to be able to do that. So yeah, moving forward with us now moving into that kind of more mature kind of stage, it feels like we're closer as a business, and it's taken a really bloody long time to get there, probably too long, some would say. But it just feels like every area of the business has that strategic planning behind it. And yeah, when you're, I think, at the early stages, it's kind of like none of that makes sense to you anyway, really. It doesn't matter how many great people you've got around you. It's like some of that is always a bit fuzzy, especially when you're still in the heart of the business.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Talk to me about letting go, because it feels like you're in a place where you've got a great leadership team that you trust, you've worked with for a long time, and that means you have let go at some point, whether by force or by or desire. And just keen to understand your journey around moving from that bottleneck early stage, everything's through you, into actually playing a true founder or CEO role where you've got good people running the day to day who are making decisions without you at times on the business. And there's a personal journey there around letting go and how that feels, and the emotional piece of doing so. Just keen to understand how you felt on that journey, and kind of how you've dealt with that.
Well, my experience is that that's the hardest part of all. Everything else, as much as it was challenging and took a lot of time and energy out of you, the letting go part, and I wouldn't say necessarily it's letting go, it's kind of moving to a place with which I'd like to think that all of us, especially when we, unless we exit a business, we have value to add within it. But we also have a chat with some of my good friends recently, which is that, we're getting to an age, and I like to think there's a lot in the bag there that we can still kind of give, but you get to an age when you have to realize that maybe this isn't moving the way at the speed that it was, and you're not on the ground with the business as much as you were. And those are all for good reasons. The business, kind of benefits from that when you're moving into that space. If I'm honest with you, and I've tried 2 or 3 different ways of doing that. And I think only now have I kind of got it to a place where I'm kind of really figuring it out. And sometimes, you'll do that too soon, you'll do that too quick. You won't have you won't have necessarily the leadership fully in place. And, especially if there are, not experience gaps, but we've got a very young team here. Our SLT are quite young, and some of that learning is far more than just what we're learning within our careers and our experience and our skill set. These are character sets here. These are personalities. And those are the things that take time.
Yeah.
So for me, it's sometimes kind of moving away and then moving back in. It's almost like doing it so it's never felt, whether you're there or you're not, to some degree. But I'm incredibly proud of what's been built, of the seed that we started, almost 15 years ago. And I think the best that any leader can do, or any founder can do, is really understand that there will be many challenges and failures along the way of when you do that. But you must continue to do that if you really want to build something that I think can go on far and become far bigger than yourself. I was really lucky when I first started, where someone was really drilling at home to me, and they built some incredible businesses. I admire them and still do greatly, where they just said to me, look, James, you need to be thinking out the plan, not just in terms of the business, but how you move yourself to the sideline, so you're not employed in the business, you're not functioning. And that individual, which was so vitally important in the business in the first kind of 6-7 years, would drive that message home to me constantly, which I'm really grateful for, because I think unless you do put that at the forefront and you have that part of your own personal plan and with the business, then I've seen, and I've experienced it myself, but I've seen too many businesses start to go the other way when that isn't happening at the right point. And great people will not stay within a business unless they get the opportunity to develop. And if they are capable enough to lead that and take that forward, I just see it as a massive crime that you don't give them the opportunity and then just build the support framework around it. So yeah, I haven't nailed it by any means. It feels balanced at the moment, which is, I think, a good place for me. But it's an ongoing piece, and I don't actually know too many people that have done it. Certainly, that I interact with that have done it well. It's normally build and exit. So, but for me, that wasn't an option. That isn't something that's ever on our radar. For me, it's about how do you create that perpetual piece that means something, that really serves, a kind of a higher purpose, and then being and adding value to that in the ways that do change and evolve, which allows us to then continue to grow even when we've done everything that we've done. So yeah, it's a challenge, that's for sure.
Yeah, makes sense. Really, really interesting hearing your commentary around that. I'm keen to dig into some of the best decisions you've ever made and some of the worst decisions you've made over the last 15 years. Are there any that stand out of those monumental moments where you think, geez, I nailed that one. I'm so glad I made that decision and I nearly didn't, versus, yeah, we got that one wrong.
Yeah, there's quite a few that I got wrong.
How have you got?
Most of the things I think I got wrong and I think it's a hard thing to know whether you do, because you learn so much from them, therefore you progress so quickly. And that is that I think I've been told a few times that I will kind of trust too quickly, give away too much, etc., etc. But for me, it's hard for me to not do that, because you then see what people are made of. You understand their character. You understand why they're doing what they're doing. You understand what they're capable of. But that sometimes you will get burnt through that process, and sometimes you will lose trust as a leader through not doing that. But I think if you can look far enough ahead, when you don't know the landscape, even the best advisors in the world won't know exactly what this is going to look like, you have to take a punt on some of those decisions. So I think a people and a hiring aspect is always going to be a big thing, with any SME. And that's always going to be difficult. I think in terms of things that we got right, I think we really, in the early days, what we got right was the first initial cohort of individuals were so incredibly passionate about what they did, even though we were all on different journeys of our skill sets and our experience, that has always been the fabric that I think will always see us through anything, because every person and every client within, or partner that we work with, they see that passion. And when you can combine that, as you get better and better and more refined, you build, a service product, whatever it is that you're putting out there in the world, to a level that even when things don't go great, you have a huge amount to fall back on with that.
Yeah.
And I think just in more detail, in our industry, it was about identifying the opportunities fast. And the reason on the day that I set the business up was the fact that you couldn't, as a business at that point in time, unless you probably had £250,000 in the bank, go and actually build out a serious transactional website. So, for us being able to, as a set of kids really being able to go out there and put a commercial product together that we were selling at 1/10 of the cost at volume, that was actually generating significantly more ROI for those clients, literally transforming those businesses over a 12-month, 2-year period. That was the one. I mean, that was, that's the bedrock. That's the core part of why we kind of began. But yeah, I think I'd be here all day if I went through some of the things that we kind of got wrong. But like I said, and I do emphasize it, those aren't things that I personally am ever going to shy away from. You have to have responsibility for them. You have to take responsibility for them. But I just think, very often that's where the gold is. It's like, okay, we don't quite know, so let's try. We don't quite know, let's try, and do it at speed. And like I said, if you can do it with a bit of a positive smile on your face, normally you can get through those periods.
Yeah, absolutely love that. Look, James, thank you so much. It's been really, really interesting hearing some of the learnings over the last 15 years. And I'm sure there are people out there that will be grateful for having heard some of those experiences. And I think, to summarize, absolutely fail fast, get in, try things, take risks, be ambitious, and drive a business forwards with intent, because it doesn't grow accidentally. It grows because you're taking those risks, and you're prepared to make difficult decisions. But I think also an underlying point that I've heard you say throughout is it's about people. Get the people right, look after people, and generally things will go better than they would if you're not doing that. And I think that's a really key reminder for people that is such an important part of any unit of people, particularly in things like business. So, James, thank you so much. I'm keen to just give you the opportunity to just give Evosite a shout out. Who can you help, and how can they get in touch with you?
Well, I think more and more we can help an awful, many businesses in many different spaces. Like I said, our focus is in e-commerce, transactional. It's about ensuring that our clients generate as much return across anything that we do, whether that be from the marketing side, or whether that be through the technology that we build, and the customer journeys that we create. But I think moving into next year, I think not just us, but there's many agencies in our space that will be able to really support what we're doing in the region, and those businesses that are ambitious. There will be opportunities everywhere next year, and I think it's having the mindset that you can actually make a difference, and I know we certainly can. We've done it for 15 years. I'd love us to be able to support more businesses in the way that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, thank you so much. Where are you best to contact? Are you hanging out on LinkedIn? Are you through the website? Are you on the what's the best way?
I'm hanging out everywhere, Owen. So it's LinkedIn, LinkedIn, or via our website. But yeah, LinkedIn is probably the best place to catch me.
Good stuff. James, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Owen.